Hey, it's Kate.
Hey, it's Joanna.
Do you like women who laugh like Roseanne?
Do you like jumping in a pool full of lemon juice covered in paper cuts?
Do you like loading a bowl at the end of a hard day? If you answered yes to one or more of these questions, you should listen to Butt Stuff on the Journey into Comics Network.
The following is a Journey into Comics Network production.
Hey, this is Josh Richmond, and you are listening to the Voice of Survival podcast, exclusively on the Journey into Comics Network.
You're listening to the Voice of Survival podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your host, Nate Phillips.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is the Voice of Survival podcast. I am your host, Nate. And today, joining me, making hilarious and weird noises, is my good friend Neil. How's it going?
It's going great. How about you, Nate?
That was hilarious. You were like making the strangest noise. What would you describe that noise as?
Well, I was thinking of it in my mind as sort of gargling mixed with like a guttural noise.
It kind of sounded like a duck drowning. Typically on the Voice of Survival, I don't introduce my guest right away, so this is a little bit different today. However, we can still do things very in order, because what I like to do is introduce my guest by way of letting people know how I got to know you. And the story of me getting to know you involves a lot of little things, like you were a mythical creature before I met you. Because I will never forget, there was like one day many years ago, Sarah came home from the studio, and she's like, I got this student. And he's kind of out there. He's a little weird. Like, I dig him. He's hilarious. He looks like young Neil in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. And you know what's really weird? And I was like, what? And she was like, his name is Neil. And I was like, holy shit, that is actually kind of really weird. So you were like this mythical person who I hadn't met. And there was some kind of fucking, I don't recall what exactly it was. There was some event happening in Highland, I think. On the square was the first time I met you, officially.
I don't remember that. When was that?
It was, Sarah was playing some piece that I don't know what the fuck it was called, man. It's been forever. But you, me, Seth, and I think Cody threw a football. Do you remember that? We actually got in trouble. They told us to stop throwing the football.
Really? I don't remember this.
You really don't remember this?
No.
Okay. I'm trying to think what exactly it was, but it was like in the summer, and it was like 2012, like about 5 years ago. So you were like 12, almost 13.
Yeah.
Because I met you maybe...
Zest Fest,
that's what it was. I met you maybe only a couple times between that first meeting and the eventual us going to see Machine Head and that whole story that we're going to get into. But it's interesting because your story in music is one that, while I'm a part of in some way, I don't fully know. And that's kind of one of the real huge reasons why I brought you on today, is I want to like peel the layers back. You're a very intricate person. You know, you're only 18 years of age right now, and you are just well-spoken. You know what you like in life, and I think that your journey through life and music and some of the crazy things you've done at concerts and experienced are not just worthy to note, but it's like great conversation to talk about.
Oh, I thank you.
So what I kind of want to start with today is take me all the way back to the very beginning. When do you like go, music, fucking love music? And like, what was the first thing that got you got that sunk its teeth into Neil, into baby Neil, maybe?
Well, when I was very young, I think my first experience with music that I remember was I was sitting in my living room at my dad's house, and he had this giant piece of some sort of particle board where you can actually see the grain of the wood. So it wasn't like actual particle board where it's just like little wood chips pasted together.
Mm-hmm.
It had a nice grain to it.
Okay.
And what my dad kind of did back then was he would have these strange wooden objects, and he would color each grain in different colors with colored pencil. And he started this project, and like I just helped. And throughout the entire project, we were listening to all of the Beatles albums on CD.
Ooh.
And that was my first kind of exposure to music in a more in-depth sense than just the radio. I remember my first concert. I think I was 5, and it was John Hyatt at Ravinia Center. That
Interesting.
was, but I wasn't really grabbed by it, really. After I had a large Beatles obsession, the next time I really got into music was right around the time I had taken piano lessons with Sarah. I was around 12 years old, and I started to get into Marilyn Manson and kind of the goth rock sort of genre, and I really appreciated the performance aspect of music, and I thought that was a really interesting thing, and I decided that I wanted my life to be somehow be involved with music.
I think you've done a great job of doing that and seeing your evolution as a person. Like, good thing about Voice of Survival is we can jump around in your story a little bit. It's super interesting because you have a really prominent part in my story of music, in my new journey of music, because you were
Really?
a part of my first show. I had been out of the game of music for a couple years, had not performed, and it just so happened that the first time Walk Among Us played, we played alongside of you guys.
Yeah, that was a really fun show. Wasn't it at Big Shots in Valparaiso?
Yeah, and
That was
a crazy night. It's just that you think it's just like this person who, again, I've known you since you were a younger dude, so the evolution of you as a person is interesting, because I do remember when you were younger and into getting into Marilyn Manson, and Sarah just said she had this student who craved the music knowledge and wanted it, at the highest level.
Not necessarily that I practiced enough, but
no, but you just had the drive that you wanted to be doing music somehow.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing. It doesn't always mean, as a musician, trust me, there are a lot of bad musicians out there who don't practice, who are very famous. There are also great musicians who practice every day who no one knows. So practice doesn't necessarily make everything. It's sometimes just the drive and will to do music at a level.
And that's definitely a very big part of it. I mean, a lot of the musicians that I'm personally into now are musicians that people rarely hear of or don't hear of at all.
Yeah, and that's another interesting quality about you. I feel like you changed your mental level of what you wanted out of music, because it was one thing with the kind of the Marilyn Manson style of music, and then now where you are in your band Belladonna. So we're going to fill this gap in here and kind of better to understand what is the journey between your becoming a teenager to where you are now, musically speaking. I know that's not a huge amount of time, but what has caused you or helped you to evolve musically to the point where you make the kind of music you make now, and you strive to learn and do different things and experiment with different sounds and stuff? I mean, you play a didgeridoo sometimes. It's incredible.
Why, thank you.
I mean, literally no other band do I know have I ever been able to say, someone in their band can play a didgeridoo.
Well, I would have to attribute the evolution of music for me to art, and in the visual sense, art is was a very large part of my childhood. I grew up going to galleries, and I understood visual art better than I did really anything else, like musically or otherwise. I understood the concept of modern art at a fairly young age, and the concept of visual art is very similar to the concept of music that I've come to slowly realize, that there's art that there's music that only musicians can really appreciate, and then there's music that is marketable to the masses, and it's not really that great in quality. And it's the same goes for art, visual art, where there's the modern art where nobody really understands why there's a single dot on a canvas, but the other artists do, and that's why they make it for the other artists, which is, I guess, a little bit conceited, but it has its own value. In art is what you art is the value of art is what people are willing to pay for it. So
correct. And it's art is definitely one of those in the eye of the beholder type thing.
Definitely.
Like you could have 3 splotches of red paint on a blue canvas sell for like $48 million because one person loves those 2 colors so much.
Yes.
And that's the only reason. And that might be the worst piece of art ever made, you know.
There was actually an artist that took a shit in a can and sealed it and sold it for millions of dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an actual true story. So.
Wow, I'm gonna have to.
Yeah, I'm not sure about the details of it, but that did happen.
Oh God, people are gross.
Yeah.
I want to kind of jump now to we're still building you as this young person coming up. I was a part of what I think was maybe the first step in the evolution of Neil.
Oh yes.
Because fate mixed with circumstance mixed with like every kind of other fucking thing possible brings the situation together where a lot of this can be recounted on episode 1 of The Voice of Survival, where Sarah was my guest, and she definitely detailed like a lot of the meeting. But we're going to definitely get your perspective on it. So Sarah does this, piano rendition of Darkness Within by Machine Head. The band likes it. They tweet it, blah, blah, blah. We end up meeting them. The student that she was talking about on that episode that got to go backstage and meet this band was you.
Yeah.
Who also had seen and heard Machine Head for the first time that day.
Well, here's another interesting fact. That was really my second concert that well, no, that's not true. That was the second of my obsessive concerts going to. My first would have been Marilyn Manson early in 2012.
Sweet.
I saw him, and then after that I was sitting at my dad's girlfriend's house in Tinley Park, and Sarah was telling me that she was going to Machine Head the next day, and I was living in Tinley Park at the time, and the show was happening in Tinley Park, so I was like, "Hey Dad, can we go?" And I begged him, and I had to do a bunch of chores to be able to go, and then we finally went, and that was really my first exposure to a festival setting, I'd say, and that really grabbed my mind, and we got to meet Machine Head, and that was such a surreal experience.
Absolutely, great word to say.
And it was I think you guys left a little bit early that night.
I ended up with a terrible migraine after everything.
Oh, yeah.
So this is the last thing I remember of the night. So like we did the meeting with Machine Head, coupled with while we were waiting on the meeting for Machine Head, you became like the most pimp ass motherfucker I've ever met, because you're just like, I'm gonna walk up to people with lanyards and see if they're in bands and get them to sign shit. Do you still have those khakis?
I do. They're hanging on my wall next to one of your spray paint paintings.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Zelda.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
actually, the painting is actually in between the legs of the pants.
That's awesome.
So it's like a nice little centerpiece.
That was the Zelda piece I did. I made it to where it hangs triangularly.
Yeah.
Or like a diamond.
Yeah.
Huh. That's awesome.
But after you guys left, Rob Zombie came on.
Yeah.
And this is actually kind of an interesting story. Me and my dad had pretty good tickets. We were in the second tier of rows, right in front of the walkway that goes around the I don't know what you would call
Pavilion?
it, a pavilion. And at the Marilyn Manson show I went to, Rob Zombie was the like one of the other acts.
Gotcha.
And what he did during that show was he walked around the stadium, and I was like, I bet he's gonna do that again. So I walked down up to the front where the thing was, the walkway was, and there were guards there, so not letting anybody go through. So I waited on the rail, and right as he came by, I jumped, and I accidentally ended up landing on his back. And I landed on Rob Zombie's back, and he got up pretty quick. It was kind of like one fell thing. He just kind of got up and kept running, but that was a very strange experience as well.
So that kind of sparked your interest in, like, if I'm going to these concerts, like hell or high water, I'm gonna rub shoulders with these people.
Yeah, I kind of went to concerts with the goal of, like, I'm going to try to meet these people, and I eventually got this little booklet that I still have. I got that booklet when I went to Mall of America and met Blake Anderson from Workaholics, and I got him to sign my Wolf Knives flag.
I totally remember you did that.
So I had this Wolf Knives flag that I got signed by one of the guys from Trivium, and then Blake Anderson, and then I had this booklet that I also got at the Blake Anderson event. That it was just a little pad of paper, and I still use that today to get signatures and stuff.
Just here, sign my
Yeah.
pad of paper. That's awesome.
So I would, anytime there was a festival in the area, whether it be like the weird ones like Warped Tour, or like Mayhem Fest when Mayhem Fest was still going around, that was that was my favorite one. I'm so pissed that they got rid of it. I would try my absolute hardest to, like, get backstage and meet them, and more often than not I was successful. And that was very fun. I ended up making a few connections with with some of the shows that I was at, and I actually, one year Mayhem Fest and Warped Tour were back to back, and there was other shows going on, and they had the same guards every night. So I got in real good with the guards the one night, and then the other night when it was Mayhem Fest, I was like, hey, can I go hang out with Cannibal Corpse in their tent signing? And they're like, sure, go ahead. So I was, like, behind the tent during their signing, and I just got to kind of butt in at the end of the line, which was a paid event. You had to pay to get into the line for that, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to meet him.
That's awesome.
That
So I want to know, you said that you started to get this success rate of going to shows and finding a way to meet these bands.
Yeah.
There have to be, I feel like, at least half a dozen stories you have of meeting band. What's the weirdest thing you've ever done to, like, get backstage or get to that point where you're meeting, these bands? And then who was it? I
actually went up to a guard to relieve them of their duty of guarding one of the gates, and I don't know how I did it, but I was able to just, like, say, oh, I'll watch this for you, and they let me, and I just watched it until close to the end of the event, and then I just went back, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, I don't remember which show that was, but that was one of them.
I feel like you told me once that you, like, jumped a fence, and something like, I can't remember who this was for, but I feel like you told me you jumped a fence, and maybe your pants ripped, or I can't. My memory's a little bit foggy, so I'm trying to hopefully jog your memory into remembering what the hell I'm thinking of.
I don't remember that.
Okay. Well, continuing on, what are some more stories you have from meeting bands? Like, what was your favorite band to meet and that was super cool and,
Well, I'll start with some of the not so great bands.
Sure.
Well, coming with Warped Tour comes, like, the pop punk and weird bands and stuff, and I was given the opportunity to go on the tour bus of this band called Black Veil Brides, and I was never really too big into what they were. I was just like kind of in the parking lot. I came for this band called Asking Alexandria.
Okay.
And I was hanging out with this guy named Ben Bruce. He's their guitar player. And I saw the tour manager of Black Veil Brides, and I was like, hey, can I go on the tour bus or whatever? I think some weird situation. And I went on, and their lead singer guy, he was a dick. He was like, why the fuck is this kid on our bus? Get off. And so, like, they kicked me off the bus.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, that guy's a dick. And then Ice-T, he was he's in a metal band.
Yeah,
And-
Body Count.
Yeah, Body Count. And I had been waiting for probably half an hour after. I think I was waiting for a different group, but I saw Ice-T walking on the other side of the fence. I was like right up next to the fence, and so was he. He was walking his dogs, and I was like, "Hey, can you?" I was really the only person there. Like,
Yeah.
he didn't like have to sign a ton of autographs or whatever, and I was like, "Hey, can you sign my book?" And he's like, "No, I don't got time for that." And he just walked away. So that was, I mean, I've had many people do that to me, but sometimes like it's hard to gauge whether it's the musicians or the guards, because a good example of that would be the Moody Blues. I saw them at Star Plaza, and I waited for about an hour back behind the place, and Justin Hayward was walking out, and there was this guard right in front of him, and he pushed people away, and it was like, what? That was... But I got to shake hands with their keyboard player, so
Ooh,
that was
awesome.
cool. And but I got really tired of that whole idea of just having to wait behind a venue, or like waiting for an hour or something. I think the longest I waited was 3 hours after a Dream Theater show.
How did it go?
Successful.
Successful?
Yeah.
Who'd you meet?
Petrucci and Rudis.
How was that?
That was one of the best experiences of my life.
Recount it. Let's recount it.
Well, so it was after the show at Chicago Theater, and I believe it was 2015, and they were, maybe 2016, I don't know. They were touring on their Astonishing album. The album is called The Astonishing, and I waited outside. It was, I believe, either February or January, and it was very cold, and there were a lot of other people there, and they were kind of weird people too. There was this one kid. He had a guitar, like an acoustic guitar, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm just trying to get this signed for my brother so we can get some money." So he got it signed by John Petrucci. So I guess he got some money out of it. How much do you think that would go for? Like,
An acoustic guitar randomly signed by John Petrucci.
Yeah.
$5. You know, just
yeah.
like...
And I just really wanted to like say hi to Jordan Rudess, because he's like my favorite musician of all time. So I waited for like almost 3 hours, and it was like 1 a.m, and him and John Petrucci came out at the same time. I wanted to meet the whole band, but they came out first, and we waited for like 5 more minutes after that, and you're like, fuck this, we're going to the car.
Yeah, it's too cold.
Yeah. But I'm seeing them on November 3rd again at the same venue, so hopefully I get to meet the rest of them.
That would be really, really cool.
Yeah.
Why is Jordan Rudess such an influence to you?
I think this is partially because of Sarah. She got me into Dream Theater originally when I was taking lessons with her at HGS many years ago. And she was like, "Oh, check out this band Dream Theater. They're super crazy, and they have their singer's like an opera singer, and all the musicians are like really good." This was back when Portnoy was still in the band, so it was like,
Of course it was. Yeah.
She still liked the band at that point. I mean, I think Mangini's just as good as Portnoy, but that's my personal opinion.
I don't have anything against Mike Mangini. I think he's a great drummer. I just would have loved to see that OG lineup.
Yeah. Well, whatever. You know.
Yeah. Can't take it back now.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that someday will happen. But Dream Theater continues on now. But back to Jordan Rudess. So what about the music of Dream Theater? Was it that they were prog and it was definitely outside of the comfort zone that you had heard before?
I think it was, I was looking at like a couple, after I had already heard of Dream Theater, and I think I got a couple songs off of Octavarium onto my phone, and I kind of put them on the back burner for a while. I went and watched one of those like Watch Mojo videos of like the best keyboardists on the planet, and like pretty much on everything that has to do with keyboardists, he's number one.
Yeah.
Or at least in the top 3. Him, Keith Emerson, and like, I don't know. Who else would be?
Bach? I don't know. I'm just that was just me. That was me.
I don't know. Maybe Ray Manzarek or something.
Oh yeah.
But
great Doors reference.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this guy looks cool. He looks like a wizard, and he is a wizard. And then I eventually found his the group he was in right before Dream Theater, which was Liquid Tension Experiment. That's with him, Petrucci, Tony Levin from King Crimson.
Okay.
And yeah, that's it. And I really, really dig that music. That's the track Acid Rain off of I forgot which album it is. There's only 2 of them. I think it's the original one. It's one of my favorite tracks of all time.
Sweet.
And this kind of brings me back to kind of what I'm into now with Tony Levin. He's in King Crimson, and King Crimson was kind of a foundation for me in Prague, I guess.
Okay.
I was already into Dream Theater, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm just gonna listen to Dream Theater forever. And then I found, I think, Starless with Tony Levin and Fripp and all the other guys at King Crimson, and I watched that and I was amazed. And then I think the next video in the YouTube track thing was this 1970 performance of Emerson, Lake and Palmer at I believe it was the Lyceum, and this was the performance where Keith Emerson took out knives and stabbed his organ.
What?
And he used the knives to hold the notes down to sustain them, and he was rocking it back and forth, and that kind of helped me get into progressive music. And at around that time, I had just joined Belladonna, and we started out as kind of like a alternative rock, like playing Foo Fighters and Chili Peppers and stuff, and nothing super complicated or whatever, but really every single person in the band just kind of grabbed a different genre of music. Like our drummer is extremely into jazz. Our bass player is a huge funk fan, and our guitarist Jerry, he's all over the place, man. He's insane. He's really on a Zappa kick right now. And
awesome.
I'm also on a Zappa kick at the moment. I have the CD in my car.
Awesome.
Playing in the. I like to play a CD over and over and over again until I get tired of it, and then I'll change it.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I get on something, I'm not leaving listening to that. I think I'm listening to the same Misfits album for like the past 3 years.
Oh, nice.
Just on repeat,
That's awesome. And we just kind of branched out in each of these respective genres and stuff. Like our drummer, I think it all really started with Snarky Puppy. Our bass player was showing me on the way back from the gig that we played together.
Okay.
On the way back, he put on a Snarky We Like It Here. He put on Lingus, and like being a keyboard player, I don't know if you've heard Lingus before.
I don't think so.
It has one of the gnarliest keyboard solos I have ever heard.
Okay.
And it was, oh my goodness, that was that instant was really one of the changing points in my musical perspective. I went home and I downloaded that whole album, and then I went online and I was looking for more stuff like it, and I found this band called VSAC 6, which is a Russian like polyrhythmic jazz group, and they're insane. I think I was looking at like demonstration videos for the Korg Kronos.
Okay.
Because I was getting ready to buy it, and I wanted to know what kind of clavinet sounds they had, and I found Valery Stepanov, who's the V part in VSAC 6. He was doing a crazy clavinet solo, and I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And then I just kind of kept looking into him, and I found his group. And I was like, this is crazy, and I showed it to my drummer, and he's very active on Spotify. So every time I'm with him, he's showing me new stuff that he's found on Spotify, new groups, and I feel like he has been instrumental, pun intended,
I see what you did there.
in my progression.
Yeah. You did I see what you did there too. That's good.
Yeah. But his influence has really, really inspired me to get into more types of music and stuff. Like he's always showing me crazy stuff. There's this one group in particular called Now versus Now.
Okay.
And they I can't even begin to explain it.
Just look up Now
Just
versus
look
Now.
up the song called Big Pump. By Now versus Now. It's a extremely crazy song, and in the middle the bass player does this Eastern vocal beat, and he synchronizes it with his bass.
Whoa.
And it's insane. Like, I don't know why this stuff isn't popular. Like, I have no clue why this stuff is not like the shit.
Because people just aren't grasping onto the. There are too many people, I think, who are stuck in this world where right now like music is just a thing that happens. No one really cares. Like, we care as musicians, but the outside looking in, you're just like, oh, so and so has another new album. Oh, it's the new Beyonce. Oh, it's the new Kanye. Oh, it's the new Taylor Swift. Oh, it's the new Katy Perry. And it's just all the same shit recycled. No one's looking for the next new thing that's different, that challenges your ears.
And you can take this all back to what we said before about how music and art are very one and the same. There's the music that musicians appreciate, and then there's the music that
for the masses.
That is just marketing. And it can all be shown in art. It's all art. Art is one and the same.
I think there's a Damien Eccles quote that Sarah has in the studio. I don't know the whole quote. I'm just going to paraphrase, but part of it says, the artist doesn't make the art. The art is the artist. And the expressions on the canvas or whatever is just a side effect of the artist being.
I'd agree with that.
And it's like, oh, that's so good. It's so well said. So it's interesting because you kind of talked a little bit about Belladonna, but I really want to kind of find out, how did that band find you, or how did you find that band? You guys have went through a little bit of a lineup change. Kind of what's going on in the now with this band?
Well, we all went to high school together.
Cool.
I met Austin, the bass player, in French class. We were in French class together,
Oui.
And we would each have our teas, and we were kind of tea aficionados. He would bring his weird tea that he got from Grindhouse or whatever,
Oh, sweet.
and I would bring my tea that I got from weird herbal places in downtown, and we just kind of trade off, and I'd be like, "What tea you got today, Austin?" He'd be like, "Oh, I got Earl Grey," and then I'd have like some like cherry hibiscus or whatever, and
Awesome.
and we just kind of like take a sip of each other's tea, and then we began talking to each other, and we had a lot in common. And this was my sophomore year,
Okay.
his junior year. Taking a step back, Brett and Jerry were seniors when I was a sophomore, and Austin was a junior when I was a sophomore.
Gotcha.
So they're all older than me.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Kess, who's our manager guy, he's in my grade.
Okay.
So we're stuck with each other.
Not for much longer, though.
No, not for much longer, but it's hard having like two friends in high school.
Especially in a big high school like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so preoccupied by what I'm doing outside of school. It's not even a big deal. But I met Austin, and he wasn't in the band at the time. It was really Jerry, Brett, this other kid who was playing bass for them, who he quit. He was one of those kids. He went to the School of Rock. That was his thing. He was in the School of Rock, and he thought he was really good. I mean, he was pretty good, and he was just funny though. You know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Kind of a little high on himself.
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
And I doubt he's gonna hear this. So I don't
Fair
feel.
enough.
And then this other kid, Nick, who was my dad had actually dated his mom back in like 2007.
Whoa.
So we were on like the level of brothers for almost a year. We shared a bunk bed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that was a really strange coincidence, and I just had Austin was friends with Jerry and Brett, and really Jerry and Brett, and I was invited to hang out with them one night, and we all hung out, and it was cool. We were with some other kids who weren't musicians, and we just kept being friends and stuff, and then I told them, I was like, oh, yeah, I play keyboard, and they were like, oh, we'd love to have you on a few tracks, you know, like maybe not all of our songs, but like just a few tracks.
You got to keep the band macho, not too much keyboard.
Yeah. And then the first show I played with them, I played every song. And then I was basically just a member at that point. I wasn't like a half member or anything. And then we all kept evolving and stuff and learning more techniques, and we just kind of helped each other grow musically. And then slowly Nick just kind of he faded out, and he actually ended up him and his girlfriend are having a baby soon, so
that's cool.
He might be moving to Colorado, and they're gonna start their life together, which was a big part in having him just
step away from his duties as the band part of the band. You know, it's weird because I saw you guys kind of early on. I don't know how many shows in you were.
It was probably like 5 or 6.
5 or 6 at that point when you guys played with us for the first time. And, you know, you think back to that show, and really a lot of the components are there that make sense. And I nothing personal against Nick. I think he's a great guy. He's come to our house several times, you know. And
really?
Yeah.
He's been here?
Yeah, he's been here a couple, 3 times. He was here one time with you guys.
Really?
Yeah, you guys came to check out and buy some tickets from us or something.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was another time he came with a mutual friend that they were just swinging by.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
So I've seen Nick a couple times.
Yeah.
But he never, to me, when you guys were playing, he was kind of like the odd man out. Not because anything different about him, but like the rest of you, the band as it is now, grooved on such a level that you guys, like, you could tell you locked in, and maybe he was just a little excited on stage and wasn't locking into what the energy you guys tapped into was.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense at all.
It does, and I feel like you're pretty much right there. The 2 of 'em, 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 2 of 'em he had a lot of really good energy, and he wanted to go a certain direction with the music, and we wanted to kind of go a different direction with the music, and it was more of just like we didn't really connect with what we wanted and what he wanted, so it just kind of was a mutual thing. We sat down and we were like, okay, Nick, we know you're having a kid, we know you're gonna plan on moving to Colorado soon. Do you think it would be best if you stayed with Blackhand, which is his other band? And he agreed, and we're still friends. We go to each other's shows and stuff. We've played with each other.
I was
before.
gonna say, you guys have been on
Yeah.
the same recently, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Those shows, we won't mention the location, but shows at this specific location are always that face. So
Yeah.
we won't have to recount that. But so you guys have started working on like an album now, like for real. In some
yes
form?
and no.
Okay.
We have enough material for an album, definitely. And if you come to one of our shows, you will hear all that material, or most of it at least. So it's we're trying new things, and we're trying to go in a direction of like sort of a jam band kind of thing. We want people to want to come to our shows. We don't want people to just be like, oh, I've been to a Belladonna show.
Yeah.
We want people to be like, oh, I've been to like 10 Belladonna shows.
Yeah.
So the way you do that is you make every set list different, and you make every show
Yes.
different. And so our whole philosophy is like, if we make every show different, people will want to come see us more than just once.
Never know what you're gonna get.
Exactly. And we keep writing new material. We're working on a crazy song right now that sounds like something out of like, yeah. I'll leave it at that.
No spoilers.
No spoilers.
I appreciate that. I also appreciate that you guys like to kind of be reinventive of yourselves, and that because that's one thing that Walk Among Us definitely strives for. Like with the style of music that we have and what we have going for us, we're kind of in a little bit of a box. Misfit songs, Danzig songs kind of have that kind of limited box, but the nice thing is, learning all those songs, we can pepper them in and always be like, oh, well, this show we're going to learn 2 new songs we've never played before just for this show. Might not play them again for 6 months or whatever, but for this one show, you're getting something we've never done before, or you're getting a set in a way we've never done it before, or you know what, or whatever. So I appreciate your guys' same approach of like mix it up. It's got to be different though. One thing you guys, we haven't really super dove into this yet, and I don't know if you want to describe it like this. You guys are kind of jam bandy, if that makes sense.
We are definitely a jam band.
Okay, like so when I say that, I don't try to say that disparaging. I think some people hear that term and they think of like just a bunch of like burnt down deadheads that have,
Well, we're teenagers, and we're a little bit more lively than that. And I'd probably go enough to say we're a lot more lively than that. I mean, the term jazz or jam band has definitely been defined, and you can go to bands like Fish and the Grateful Dead and Widespread Panic and String Cheese Incident and yada yada yada, twiddle, and and you be able to define what most people would consider a jam band. And we take elements of a jam band, like different set lists, improvisational moments, peaks and lows and stuff. We incorporate that into our music, but we try to take it as like a it's so hard to define it.
It's like every set list is a musical journey.
Yeah.
You don't want it to just be like running at a steady pace.
Yeah.
You want to make people feel a really certain high energy.
Yeah.
You want to be able to take it away from them all the same and then build them back up so they can have felt
Yeah.
the thing.
Well, to like classify Belladonna in a genre, I'd say pretty much every person in the band would have a different thing to say. I would say jazz fusion, where the fusion aspect comes from prog, funk, and Zappa.
I love it. That's like a great description.
I'm sure if you ask any of the other guys, they'd probably tell you something different.
Well,
So-
yeah, especially from their perspective of what they're hearing and where their influences lay. Now, I want to say within talking about the jam band thing, you're talking about writing music. How does that work for recording an album when it's time to, like, an album is final? You know, you can't go back and constantly jam and change a part. So what, like, where does your decision when you're thinking about recording, and I don't know if you guys have officially done studio work like that or not, but, like, where does the decision of, like, okay, well, this is enough? Like, when do we put a cap on it, you know?
Well, we tried recording and stuff, and we had some success, and we had a few setbacks and stuff, and we're still working out stuff, but we have come to the conclusion that we might do something different.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, is that, again, another spoiler? Like, you have an idea, a concept, but you're going to hold on to it, keep it in your chest pocket?
Live A, album A.
Oh, see, that's a good way to do it, is just to have a live show of sorts.
Possibly, yeah. So we're fiddling with that idea, you know.
I like that. Huh. I think that's one thing that would be very important for your band going through the recording process as well, is to capture the actual energy.
Yeah.
You go into a studio,
Definitely.
You put a click to it, you're trying to make everything super tight, quote-unquote tight, to a rhythm or whatever, and the next thing you know, it sounds really robotic, and you've lost whatever the specialness is that makes the Belladonna music the Belladonna music.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with that, and I've been talking to people. I have a producer friend who's kind of working his way up in the avant-garde jazz industry, and he gave me some really good advice on, like, most of the albums that he's produced with some pretty big names have been live albums, and they've been recorded in one take, and they've been very successful. And I think if we put our mind to it, we have this specific show that's coming up that we might be recording live.
Oh, sweet.
And we're just gonna practice our asses off and make sure it's as clean as possible, and
Just
Just
stay in
do
the
it.
moment when it's time. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
we're just gonna do it.
Yeah, I think, as a musician, I have a question for you, because I noticed that you guys, your stage setup can be a little bit cumbersome because there are a lot more people on your stage, you know?
Yeah.
So, do you feel like the performing to a crowd and not performing to yourselves can change everything?
We don't change it. We perform to each other.
Exactly. That's what I'm asking. I was kind of curious to, like, I guess I'm trying to find the way to word this the best, is like, the crowd can give you a certain energy that can kind of spark a certain thing,
Mm-hmm.
but being that you guys stylistically have to stay so tight because you are, like, you're literally speaking freely with your instruments in the moment, right?
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing, to talk with music just on the fly and just to kind of riff ideas right there, then and there within something you've already created. But can the aspect of having a crowd there that's maybe cheering loudly or something affect and possibly take you guys out of it? Or is, like, that's something you guys really focus on, is, like, no matter what, you're just locked into each other?
Well, first off, I'm gonna say that initially, when we started, because we started as what we are now, as just in my basement or in Brett's basement, just jamming, and it's hard. Initially, it was hard to recreate what we did in rehearsal during shows, because improvisational jamming is not the easiest thing, despite contrary belief, you know.
Well, no, you have to know what you're doing.
You have to
with
know
the
what you're
music.
doing. You have to know what you're doing within the music, and you also have to know what everybody else is doing. and it can get confusing and it can get chaotic, but I think the real main goal of a jam band is to know your place
and know when to
know when to do certain things.
Correct, and that's another thing that as somebody who's doing really good things within your band, you've also learned how your other members speak with their instrument when they're riffing. So you can go, okay, so Brett is doing this here, and then he's going to kind of lead this solo of the drums into this next section of the song, but I know he's probably going to riff this drum solo long enough that by the time he does this last fill, we're there and taken back off.
And it's this cool dynamic that we've all been playing with each other long enough. We really haven't been playing with each other that long, but I think we've been playing with each other long enough that I know when the other guys are going to do certain things. Like, I know that if I play a certain melody, not necessarily a specific melody, but like a certain style, I can kind of influence the other guys to just go into that style in a certain way that makes it fluid.
Nice.
And I think they can also do that with us.
Good. So you see, you guys have learned how to speak beautifully to each other across the board, which is nice.
Yeah.
Did that get... Okay, this is going to maybe be a hard question for you. Was that easier or harder when Nick was a part of the band? I mean, because...
We jammed exactly once when Nick was in the band.
Really?
Yes.
So you guys, as a... What are you, 5-piece now? 4-piece? 4. Now as a 4-piece, you guys have kind of, as you were saying, a repertoire with each other. So much so that I'm sure it was probably easier to say, like, okay, if Nick is planning to make these changes and we have to be ready for it, we're already ready for it.
Yeah, we just had written out songs with Nick. All of our songs were structured and written out, and I think we're much more comfortable with each other now that we can start a song, and we have a structure for many of our songs. You've probably heard our song No Mas, where it's kind of like jumpy, you know.
What's that song that Jerry does the crazy screaming on?
We scrapped that one.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was a Nick exclusive.
Oh, well, then that makes sense.
We have scrapped every single song except for No Mas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, all new material now.
That's exciting.
Next time you see us, you will hear
pretty much all
everything new.
Shit, okay.
But
good to know.
We have a specific solo section in No Mas, and sometimes that'll be 5 minutes long, and sometimes it'll be 4 minutes long. Sometimes it'll be almost non-existent.
Yeah.
You know?
Just depends on how the night is going.
It depends on the energy, yeah.
Yeah.
And back to what you were saying earlier, does the crowds have an influence on how we play? I would say no.
Okay.
Because if we're playing in Royal Skate Shop and there's nobody there,
you still want to put on a performance for yourself.
We're still putting on an amazing show. Because that's just what we want to do.
I feel like a spaceship landed next door. There's like bright lights all of a sudden. Oh, I bet my neighbor's about to pull out.
They have a dog. It's a nice looking dog. It's a white German Shepherd.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So you know more about my neighbors than I do.
I saw it last time I was at lessons, and I saw the dog, and it was barking at me, and I barked right back. Woof, woof.
Woof, dude. Woof. Yeah. So moving forward within Belladonna, what's next for you guys? Like, I know you have some shows coming up, and you can obviously plug any of those shows here. So we can obviously, help bring some people in. But outside of just shows, what are you guys? I mean, what's the long-term goal for this?
Well, I've been working at Lumpin' Radio.
Yeah, we can talk about
pretty
that
much
too.
Very consistently throughout the past 6 months. I've graduated to their head sound engineer.
Yeah.
And that's fun. So I think that's part of the community that's really the hub of the avant-garde jazz scene in Chicago right now. That is, Bridgeport is the place for avant-garde jazz. And if we can just kind of like slip in, find our place there, that would be great. I'm meeting lots of people. I'm making connections and stuff, and I'm just trying to get our name out there. We have a show at Lumpin' Radio on November 18th. I think it's 2321 South Morgan Street.
Okay, we can fact check that and put it in the description.
November 18th.
Okay, cool.
It's
only 2 weeks from today.
Yeah, really?
That's when the episode drops. It will be 2 weeks from
today.
Okay,
yeah.
So there you go. That's time travel for you.
Yeah, cool. Sweet, time travel. Yeah. And that'll be I think it'll be a good show. It's going to be one of our first introductions into the Bridgeport scene, which is becoming a really booming scene.
Sweet.
There's lots of really, really, really cool stuff coming out of Bridgeport right now. And
how did you get involved with Lumpin' Radio, I guess, is another great question.
That's a very long story.
Bring it on. We have time.
Well,
if you have time.
I have time, yeah.
Okay, sure.
My stepdad is a visual artist, hence why I was brought into the art world at an early age.
Way to tie it back to the start of the story. Great job.
Yeah. And the space Lumpin' is in was a gallery space for many years, and it still is. And he showed there for many years. I've been going to the space since I was about 10 years old. And they, in 2015, started a radio station, a FM radio station, low-power FM radio station, 105.5 FM, broadcasted throughout the city limits of Chicago. And I talked with the guy who runs the space, and I was like, hey, you need some help? Because it's a 501c nonprofit, and they don't make too much money, so I was like, hey, you need some help? I can do sound stuff if you want me to do sound stuff. And you're like, yeah, talk to this guy. And then I talked to that guy, and then I talked to this guy and that guy, and
you kind of
I'm helping out
jumped
now.
Through the hoops and then ended up landing yourself like an internship, right?
Yeah, it's an internship, and it's a really fun thing. I love going out there. Every time I go out there, there's something new going on, and there's events at the space and some crazy events. There's like there's this one event that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was a cardboard show, and it was all pieces of art that were done on cardboard.
Interesting.
And these people, they came into the space with a stroller, and it was like a kind of a small stroller, and I was like, oh, they got a baby or something. And upon closer inspection, I saw a little head pop out, and it was not a human head. It was a coyote.
What?
It was a 22-year-old coyote.
An old coyote?
A very, very old coyote. I thought it was a baby coyote at first because it was so lethargic and it was tiny. And unfortunately, it turns out that the coyote passed away the next day. But
dang, that's screwed up.
It was a very weird experience seeing a coyote in an art gallery.
That sounds like the name of a song, The Coyote in the Art Gallery, and it's like a double entendre where the coyote is maybe somebody who's trying to like steal some art, but maybe the coyote is actually this old person.
Yeah, the coyote's like trying to get people across the border, and it's just,
oh God.
He represents society as a whole, and it's just yeah, man. Yeah.
So I guess then moving forward with all of this is like long term. What's next for Neil? What are you doing? You're going to graduate soon.
I want to play big shows.
Big shows? What does that
shows.
even mean?
Well,
what is a big show? I mean, I'm asking more as a friend because what do you define that as? For a long time, I thought I knew what that meant, and then I think the more you're in the music scene, you learn more, and I want to know, in your opinion, what defines big show?
Eventually, I want to set up a festival
Okay, I love it.
full of like-minded, cool people,
Love it.
and just have a giant field that I can set up a stage in, and Belladonna will play for 4 hours consecutively.
Wow, that's a long show, bro.
Yeah,
I like it.
and all non-repeated music, and just a big festival in the open air where there's like people selling merchandise, not necessarily our merchandise, but just like cool stuff, like if you were like to go in the parking lot of a Grateful Dead show.
Handbags,
And jewelry and
Love it.
pipes and
I love
other
it.
stuff.
Awesome. I love
And
it.
like, I'd want it to be more than just us, so that we'd be able to branch out. So like, I'd want to have like other groups.
It's cool because there's a podcast network I'm aware of that could totally sponsor this event.
Oh yeah. And that may be in the works in the next maybe 2 or 3 years.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So this is everything is all happening very soon, man. Well, we're almost at the hour mark here today. I don't know. What I always typically do with my guests is leave the audience with the guests saying anything that I maybe did not talk about that we want to start getting into. So now's the point where, if so far what we've talked about is not quite where you wanted the conversation to steer, if you want to take the steering wheel and push us in a direction, now's your opportunity.
I would like to just make a weird noise for a couple seconds.
Sure, make a weird noise.
And I also have another thing to say.
Okay. You are hilarious. Definitely my most interesting guest I've had on so far.
Thank you for having me.
Dude, thank you so much for being on. As always, folks, you can check out The Voice of Survival on all the different social media sites, whether it be Facebook at The Voice of Survival Podcast, Instagram at Voice of Survival Podcast, or Twitter at Voice of Survival. As always, check us out across all the different podcasting apps, whether it be iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher Radio, Google Play Music, Overcast, Downcast, whatever you're listening to podcasts on. You can also check out everything on JourneyIntoComics.com. Get exclusive content by going to Patreon.com/JourneyIntoComics. $1 gets you early access to everything on the network. $3 gets you exclusive content that you will not get anywhere else. Mr. Neil, thank you so much today for coming on and being a part of the show.
Wadawanga.
Oh, you're hilarious, man. It was great to have you on. Thank you so much.
To be on.
Folks, check out Belladonna. They're an awesome band. If they're in your area, go out and see them. They will not disappoint you. As always, for the Voice of Survival Podcast, this was episode 7. I'm Nate.
I'm Neil.
And we will see you guys later. Stay strong.